I am Sandra. I'm going to be your MC for today's Wednesday webinar. We have with us today our Managing Director, Tucker Johnson, and Caroline Lee, who is Director of Operations at ISI. They are going to be talking to you today about project management soft skills part 2. A couple of things before we begin. We are streaming this webinar live to Facebook and YouTube. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments and we will be back to you. We'll be answering them, and if we don't have time for it today, we're just going to continue answering them after the webinar. If you have a Twitter, use hashtag #NIMSI_insights and include the handle at @NIMSI_insights, and we can get all your questions from Twitter. We will answer everything at the end of the webinar. And please, if you have any questions today or tomorrow, whatever day, just post them and we'll come back to you. We will be recording this webinar, so we're going to be putting them in our YouTube channel after. So be sure to go back to it and watch part 1 as well in our YouTube channel. Remember to join us in all of social medias, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you prefer. And that's everything for me. Without further ado, Tucker, they're all yours.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for that very warm welcome. As Sandra said, my name is Tucker Johnson. I am the Managing Director of NIMSI Insights, and I just want to get us kick-started today by talking about the goals of what we want to do here today. Now, if you joined us for part 1, then a lot of this may seem like repeat material, and that's just fine, because this is essentially the second part of a 2-part series. We're going to start off, but I want to be clear that we're going to be reviewing some things that we already know in here. So we're going to cover a lot of basics in here, but hopefully along the way we're going to learn some new techniques. And if you can take 1 or 2 things from this webinar today that you can put into practical use immediately, then we consider that a success. And the practicality of this is a big deal of what we're trying to do here. We want to give you some simple, actionable, practical things that you implemented immediately to start getting immediate results that you can start seeing from your efforts. And really, as managers, what we want to be doing is leading by example for our team members and the managers reporting to us. So in the first part of this, I asked you to look at this from 2 different sets of eyes. One from your set of eyes, and another from the set of eyes of perhaps your colleagues or your direct reports, people that are reporting to you, thinking, what can these people get from this? How can I share this webinar, share this information with other people that it may be useful for? And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing today. And on our agenda today, just quickly to recap, if you haven't had a chance to view part 1 of our webinar, it is available on YouTube. It is available on the NIMSI Facebook page. I encourage you to check it out. We covered universal soft skills. I started off by talking about some soft skills that can be applicable to any situation, regardless of the situation. Carolyn brought it in a little deeper to talk about managing stakeholders, meaning external stakeholders like clients, your supply chain, and internal stakeholders as well. This time we're going to bring it down even more specific as we get into part 2, and Carolyn's going to start off by talking about how to manage your team. Most project managers have teams that they work with. They either report directly to the project manager or they just work with the project manager. So it's a very important subject that we need to cover, is managing the team. We'll probably spend most of the time on that today. Then I'm going to take over and talk about this one thing that we don't often talk about, we don't talk about enough, which is managing yourself. As project managers, we often forget, we're so busy managing everybody else, we often forget to manage ourselves. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today, and then we're going to wrap it up by giving a brief summary of what we talked about and some practical tips for how we can get to work right away. So really excited to get started here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Carolyn, who's going to kick us off with managing your team. Carolyn, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tucker, and hi everybody. It's very nice to be here again. and be doing our second part of project management soft skills. I hope that you found the last webinar useful. And today, as mentioned just now, we will focus on two parts, managing your team and managing yourself. And I will start with managing your team. So whether you are a project manager, a team lead, a supervisor, or a linguist, there is always a team that you have to work with. In an LSP, working effectively with your team is key not only to your own success, but also the success of your team, your company, and your clients. And that's why we decided to include this part in our webinar. I also want to mention that when it comes to managing your team and when it comes to leadership, there's so many different ways to go about this. And there is really no methodology that will fit perfectly for everybody. So what I'm doing today is sharing my thoughts based on my and others' experiences. And my goal, just like what Powder said just now, is to share some useful, actionable, and practical information with you to help inspire and provide some guidance. So we're here today because most of us are from the language industry. Working as an LSP with so many bright and talented people has been an extremely valuable experience for me. And I want to start my presentation by touching base on what it is like to lead as an LSP. This company aspect should feel very familiar to those of us from the language industry. So we all have a team with a wide range of talents, and we're able to translate and work with hundreds of different languages. It's an impressive number. It shows that we all come from a multicultural and multilingual background that fits very well to what we do on a daily basis. And we can be a project manager, a coordinator, a DDPer, a localization engineer, a linguist, and so on and so forth. And most importantly, we are the problem solvers who always wear different hats. And depending on the company, there's always a busy period where we are hit with overwhelming workloads. And this is where teamwork really comes into play. We deal with not just tight, but nearly impossible or simply impossible deadlines. Things move along very fast in this industry. Also, a lot of what we do can be repetitive. For example, creating quotes or orders, sending files to our linguists, formatting files in a specific way, creating invoices, or billing the clients. And lastly, because many things need to be done in a very, very specific way, it is important to have streamlined processes in place. So everyone is doing things the same way. And this also promotes cross-training and prevents single points of failure when things need to be tackled urgently. I personally like to have processes, and I believe that good processes eventually lead to a capable, successful, and autonomous team that will function extremely effectively. So, what is a leader? In my opinion, there are three things that define a good leader. Number one, people can trust you. As we know, any good relationship is based on trust. And when it comes to managing your team, there's no exception. And second, people can follow you. With trust and good instructions, you need good soldiers to follow you to get the job done. And the third one is people can be inspired by you. And this is the most important one because you want to give your team their own internal drive, not just pushing them to get the job done. You need your team to not just listen to you and do what you ask them to do. You also need them to believe in what you believe. So the next title of this slide is Start with Why. This answers questions such as how do you get people to trust you, to follow you, and to be inspired by you? These are the key questions for how you become a more effective leader. First, trust. Do you know what you're talking about? Do you know why you're giving instructions and making decisions? The idea is that you need to know why you're doing specific things and make sure the team knows why you're doing them. That's how you can build trust. The more they can see that you make good decisions, the more they can trust your ability to lead. And when it comes to following, The same thing applies to letting people know they can follow your instructions. Show them that they can follow your lead by making sure that they know why you're telling them to do something and how this makes sense. And third one, very important one again, how do you become an inspiring leader? So when you have a clear vision and a reason for everything that you do, this will help make your decisions become faster and more purpose-driven. Finding that purpose for what you do is a key in developing your team's overall strategy and for becoming a better leader. In many companies, leaders simply tell their employees to just make a change with the expectations that the benefits are obvious. However, without knowing why a change is being made and what the big reasons are for creating a new procedure, most people will see only the hassle and problems associated with the change. Your job as a leader is not just to provide instructions, but to explain the full reasons for how the change will benefit everyone in the company. Your message and process need to be as simple and clear as possible. Your purpose, not your instructions, is what will inspire and motivate people to do good things. So, the next one is what is expected of you as a leader. You always have to lead by providing a good example. And this is very important, so I'm going to repeat again. Always lead by example. Because the culture comes from the top. It always does. And remember, your team's behavior is a direct reflection of your behavior. For example, if you're not responsive, your team may not be responsive to their peers or to the client. You want to encourage your team to come to you when they have any challenges and be empathetic, be sympathetic. If it's a work-related issue, work together to find a good solution. If it's personal, depending on the situation, be very understanding and tell them that you're there if there's anything you can do for them. So what do your employees want to know? There are two things. What's my job and what will my job be 6 months from now? So basically, they want to know what they need to do now to get ahead, and they want to know how they can still be of value in the near future. So how do you work with them to figure this out? First, you need to set very clear goals with them and tell them what development plan you will be giving them. Set meaningful but realistic goals because you want to set them up for success. Give more weight to more important targets. And finally, use measurable criteria to determine what it means to meet or exceed the goals. So for example, set a number of projects to complete or a percentage of projects to complete without errors or complaints per month, an on-time delivery rate, staying under a specific budget, or achieving a revenue target. These are all specific and measurable goals that you could use to weight and to show the employee if they've met it or if they've exceeded it. So goals can change. We all have to be flexible based on different circumstances, but measurable expectations should be set to let people know how to stay on track. And use the regular one-on-ones. Usually I like doing one-on-ones with my employees maybe once a week or every other week because these are great opportunities for me to provide clear, constructive, and timely and specific feedback. Whether they're doing good or they're doing bad, they need to know. And next one is providing feedback. So as a manager, a big part of our responsibility is to provide feedback. And that's why I want to spend some time to discuss providing feedback in this slide. Again, you always want to set people up for success. When you set them up for success, then your company becomes a win-win environment, where the company not only achieves its goals, but each employee also succeeds. This creates an environment where leaders are not just looking out for themselves, but also looking out for their team, and will be better for the company morale in the long run. So when you have an opportunity to provide feedback, give it immediately. If you wait more than a week to give feedback, it will be more difficult for everyone to remember what happened. It will also be more difficult to apply in the future. Also, you need to be very specific about what was done well and what could use improvement. Focus on facts and talk about specifically what specifically should have been done in a different way and what are the alternative options. If you're too general, no one will know what to do if it occurs again. And try to see things from their perspective, but also ask them to understand how things look from your own viewpoint. And there are a lot of creative ways to provide feedback. For example, you can do case studies with your team, you can do role plays or scenarios. All of this will promote problem-solving skills and encourage everyone to brainstorm and find solutions together. A working relationship between an employer and an employee needs to be a good fit on both sides. In some cases, a person will not be a good fit for a role. And this is definitely one of the harder issues that a leader needs to deal with. And unfortunately, as a leader, we all have to deal with this. But in the long run, it's best for everyone if the right person is found for the right role. So by setting people up for success, by providing immediate and specific feedback, and by working with your team members, you will be trying your best to move everyone on your team forward. And if it becomes absolutely necessary, you may have to let someone go. And when the issue is about fit, you may be doing the person a favor and they may thank you later. So as a leader, you need to take full ownership of everything that happens underneath you. If one of your employees misses a deadline or offends a client, or if you're experiencing an IT issue that shuts your entire office down, as a leader, you are responsible for making sure that these events do not lead to long-term damage to your company. You are therefore responsible for putting in the training, the contingency plans, and the personnel into place to give your team and company the best chance of succeeding. If situation arises, don't blame and don't point fingers. Ask yourself first, could you have provided better context, training, or guidance to prevent this or similar events from occurring? So when you take full responsibility, then your team will also learn to be responsible for their actions. And trust me, you will notice a change almost immediately. One of the big problems in any company is how to keep meetings under control. Every solution seems to involve another set of even longer meetings. One way to keep this under control is to use Scrum. Personally, I'm a big fan of Scrum. So Scrum meetings are short 10 to 15 minute meetings with a group of key decision makers. And in that Scrum meeting, each person briefly describes in 1 minute what they're working on, what challenges they're facing, what actions they're taking, and their timeline for completing their tasks. When each team member describes what challenge they're facing and who they are waiting on, it becomes easier for other team members to coordinate with them to figure out how to prioritize first steps. So Scrum also includes setting short, measurable milestones that can be accomplished in a short period of time. Some people call this sprints. This helps as a goal-driven environment, gives the team a sense of achievement when the goals are met, and helps you figure out how long it takes to accomplish any task. And Scrum also helps keep things transparent, which always helps to keep up morale and prevent people from internalizing their feelings. And in my experience, Scrums are extra important during a busy period because you need to meet up with people, you need to talk to them, otherwise it's easy for them to internalize their feelings and then might feel disgruntled due to the heavy workload. And this process makes it easier and clear that you are in this together as a team, rather than each person looking out for themselves. And at its best, Scrum can help teams become autonomous and capable of finding solutions for many issues. And lastly, I want to talk about learn to let go of perfection. So where we are because of many reasons, and one of the reasons can be we are all perfectionists, and we are all a little bit OCD. We want everything to be perfectly done, or to be done in a very, very specific way. Unless, of course, you are actually a brain surgeon, in which case, please do your best. But for most of us, imperfection is going to happen, whether you plan for it or not. So you need to create an atmosphere where people can come to you for solutions when mistakes happen, and focus on next steps rather than blame will help you move forward to big and better results as a team. And remember, take responsibility, take ownership, and take the blame, and think about how you can provide feedback to the team immediately and specifically. And that concludes my part of this webinar. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I would like to turn over to Tucker for the next part on managing yourself.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. That was awesome. I especially like the I use this all the time. Learn to be comfortable with imperfection. I think sometimes as project managers, as we get promoted, as leaders, we get promoted to that point because we're good at what we do. Good project managers become senior project managers and manage people. And good project managers are good at doing things. And one of the struggles I see all the time happening is leader project managers, senior project managers often find that the people, their team members, the people they're working with, don't do it good enough. They don't do it as well as they would themselves. So it's an interesting thing. So my section now, managing yourself. I'm very excited to talk about this because this is one of the often overlooked things when we talk about management with project managers, is this idea of managing ourselves. And as project managers, we're often so wrapped up in managing our supply chain, managing our teams, managing our clients, managing our bosses, that we forget to manage ourselves. And really, this is one of the most important things that we can do as project managers, because at the end of the day, we're the only people that we actually have control over. Like, I'm the only person that I have control over, real control in this world. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. It's an exciting topic for me. And to start off, I want to talk about this idea of getting to know yourself. And so many people out there, project managers or otherwise, I find that don't take the time to get to know themselves. And it's kind of a shame. Really, at the base of it, you need to know two things about yourself. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And this is true in life and it's true in business. Because if I don't know my strengths, then I don't know what it is that I can do that adds value. Whether that's adding value to my client, adding value to my team members, adding value to whatever stakeholders or whatever process I'm doing. I really need to know what I'm good at, because that's where I'm going to want to focus my energies on, because that's where I can maximize the amount of value that I bring to the situation. Conversely, though, I also need to know my weaknesses. And this is especially true for managers, anybody in a leadership position, because if I don't know my weaknesses, then I don't know where I may be missing out or dropping the ball. If I do know my weaknesses, then I can make sure to put into place either processes or other people that help compensate for those weaknesses. Now, that might mean that, for example, if I don't like doing sales, I don't like account management, I don't like talking to clients, then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure that there's one or two good people on my team that are really good talking to clients. And then I don't have to do that. Let them do it. And that's how you can build a really functional, effective team, but only if you know your strengths and only if you know your weaknesses. the next thing every project manager or anybody should know about themselves is, what are your goals? Specifically, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your 1 year goal? What's your 5 year goal? What's your 10-year goal? And a lot of people, myself included at different points, I don't have a 5-year goal. They don't know where they want to see themselves in 5 years. And this is a shame, because if I don't know where I want to be, then I can't take steps to get there. If I don't know where the X on the treasure map is, then I have no map. I can't follow the treasure map. So if you want to progress in your career, if you want to progress in life, I strongly suggest that you sit down, you get to know yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And what are your goals? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? That's very forward-looking. And in order to look forward, we need to know what we're doing here in the present. And in the present, why am I here? And I don't mean this so much in like the existential sense of like, why are any of us here? Though I kind of do mean it like that. I specifically mean it like, what am I doing as a leader, as a project manager? Is this something that I'm passionate about? Do I enjoy this work? What value do I bring to this work? And the reason this is important is because I've seen so many people, there's not much sadder in this world, more sad, than seeing someone struggle to be in a role that they're not a good fit for. And that has certainly been me in the past. I have had positions and I've had jobs that I was not great for, and I wasn't happy, my bosses weren't happy, my clients weren't happy. And if I'm honest with myself, I need to be constantly asking, is this a good fit for me? Am I doing the right thing? Why am I here? It's a very important question to ask. So that's kind of the high level of getting to know ourselves, because I wanted to start talking about this because it leads very nicely into these more granular subjects of what to do in certain situations. So particularly, I want to talk about, what do we do when we're upset? And this is important to talk about because when I'm upset, I find that I make poor decisions. I say things that shouldn't be said, and it can often not go so well. So here's some practical, simple things that I've learned that really have saved my butt in the past. First of all, the drafts folder is your friend, and I mean in your email inbox. Before hitting send on that email that might not be incredibly polite, save it in your drafts folder. This has saved me so many times. If you have time, if you can afford it, save it in your drafts folder for 24 hours. Come back to it 24 hours later, reread it. Does it still seem appropriate? Does it still seem necessary to send it? And if the answer is yes, then go ahead, send it. But 95% of the time that I save a full email in my drafts folder before sending, I come back to it and I realize, ooh, I'm glad I didn't send that because maybe it wasn't the nicest thing to send. Another option is just to get someone to proofread it for you. So that could be a boss, it could be a colleague, basically someone neutral, someone like a third party who doesn't have a vested emotional stake in whatever situation you may be dealing with. And they can usually quickly tell you, yep, that looks okay. I don't see anything inappropriate there. Or they say, whoa, you might want to rethink even sending that at all. Or maybe here's some edits that you can implement before sending. But it never hurts to have the email looked at by a third party. Particularly, one of the things that you can do as well during this process, the email saved in your drafts folder, you're having it proofread by somebody else or edited by somebody else, go back and reread the original email that you got. Now, I'm assuming this is a situation that involves email. Sometimes I will get an email and I will read it and I will understand it in a certain way, and I take offense to that. I become upset, and then I want to respond in an upset manner. And I'll write out this long, either passive aggressive or aggressive email. In response, I'll save it in my drafts folder. And then while it's sitting in my drafts folder, I go back and I read the original email that I had received. And I realize, oh, they're not saying at all what I thought they were saying. Like, they're not being a jerk. They're just saying blah, blah, blah. And I'm so glad that I reread it, because here I have this nasty, passive-aggressive, toxic email that I want to send back. And it's all for nothing. It is because of my misunderstanding. So reread it, the original email. Get someone else to read it. See if their understanding of it is the same as your understanding that you took away from it. And where possible, pick up the phone. People respond differently when you get them on the phone. If it's someone in the same office as you that you may be upset with, go by their desk. Go talk to them in person. In person is even better than the phone. Now, the one scenario where I don't recommend doing this is when you are very, very, very upset. Give yourself some time to cool off. I'm not saying that when I'm upset, I need to go confront that person immediately while I'm still mad. No, I'm saying the opposite of that. I'm saying if you are, give yourself some time, process it, and then go talk to that person or pick up the phone and talk to that person. But if I'm still visibly shaking because that's how upset I am, last thing I want to do is go by that person's desk. Trust me. As Carolyn said, just remember, we're not brain surgeons. When we mess up, nobody dies. A lot of what we're going to talk about in a bit, a lot of the stuff that gets us in trouble is, it essentially boils down to taking ourselves too seriously. Ego. And at least with me, usually when I'm upset, I find that it's because my ego is getting in the way, or perhaps I'm taking myself a little bit too seriously, a little bit more seriously than I should. Or I feel that somebody else isn't taking me as seriously as they should be taking me. All just fancy ways of saying my ginormous ego is getting in the way. So watch out for ego. Another tool that's very useful for me when managing myself is really making sure that I'm asking myself the question, what do I have control over? It's important because, well, the first step is I need to identify what's in my control and what's not in my control. And there's different levels of control, but really at its core definition, as I mentioned earlier, the only thing that I have control over, complete control, is myself, the way I interact with other people, the way I respond to situations. I have complete control over that. I have zero control over how other people respond to situations. I have zero control over what happens most of the time, most days, but I can control how I respond and the way I act. Now, the stuff that I don't have control over, it's important that I don't dwell on that. That's not productive. It's not productive for me. It's not productive for anybody else. I know folks that they will analyze their day and go back and say, oh, when I was talking to so-and-so, I should have said this instead of that. Or maybe I should have done that instead of this. And dwell on that. And that stuff's all in the past. That happened already. It's in the past, so I don't have any control over it. So there's no point in me or you or anybody dwelling on stuff that happened already. Now, can you learn from it? It goes back to that knowing yourself and self-reflection, being self-critical. Yes, absolutely. But don't lose sleep over it. Do not dwell on what has already happened. Do not dwell on things that you can't control. Did your company just go bankrupt? You don't have any control over that. Should you take action? on that? Should you make some decisions and do some things? Absolutely. But don't dwell on it. Don't stress out over it. Save your stress for things that you can control. And for those things, you need to take decisive action, take quick action, and get the results that you want. And because you're not dwelling on all the stuff that you don't have any control over, then you have that much more energy to focus on taking actual real steps and taking action towards the things that you do have control over. So very important, whether in management, project management, whether in life, don't spend a lot of time wasting you have a limited amount of stress. Don't stress out over things that aren't going to get you actual results. And I said it before, I will say it one last time. Most of this comes down to ego. When I'm talking about managing myself, what I'm talking about is a huge ego. And that's not always so difficult. You catch me in a bad mood, you catch me before my coffee in the morning, and I'm not going to respond very well. And usually it's because I'm thinking a little bit too highly of myself or my abilities, or maybe I'm not thinking highly enough of other people's needs or wants. And as a general rule, the less self-involved I can be as a manager, as a vendor, as a client, as a human being, the better results I get, which is somewhat paradoxical. Like, the less I worry about myself and my needs and what I want, the more value I get and the more value that I give into any situations. And that's all just done by keeping your ego in check, keeping my ego in check. It's one of the most important things I can do to manage myself. So, what does this all mean? Where can we go from here? And I want to leave you guys today. We want to leave you guys today with some practical advice, some key takeaways from this. So, Carolyn talked about how trust is essential, and I can't agree more. Is that if you don't have an environment of trust built with your team, your colleagues, your stakeholders, then it's going to be very, very hard to get anything done. We waste so much time not trusting people that it's one of the worst efficiency killers out there, is lack of trust. And how do you build a culture of trust? Well, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, then the good news is, and the bad news perhaps, is that culture comes from the top. If you're in a position of leadership or management, then you have an opportunity to influence the culture of the team that you work with. Now, just to reiterate what Carolyn already mentioned, is that typically when I present culture comes from the top, I put in parentheses always, in all capital letters, triple exclamation point, because I have yet to see an exception to this rule. If you want to understand the culture of a team, let's say you just got a new job at a new company, or you're changing teams within a company, or whatever the scenario may be, it's very simple to understand what the culture of that company or that team is going to be. Just watch the leader, just watch the senior manager of that team. And I guarantee you, the way that person acts, the way that person treats people, that is going to be the culture of the team. If that person's a workaholic, then a lot of people on that team are going to be working very long hours. If that person is arrogant, then there's going to be a lot of arrogance. If that person is very humble and polite, then people are going to be polite on that team. Culture comes from the top. The good news is, if you're a manager, you get to influence the culture that's affecting your team on a daily basis. One of the ways we can do that is, one of the best ways to promote culture is interacting with your team members, providing feedback to them. As Carolyn mentioned, make sure it's timely, make sure it's relevant, make sure it's coming from a place, it's constructive feedback, it's coming from a good place. And The reason this comes so close to talking about trust is because that if you have that culture of trust, then providing feedback is very appropriate, very easy, and very expected, because people trust each other and you don't have to waste time beating around the bush, essentially. Be careful, if you don't have this strong culture of trust built, then feedback could be perceived in a negative light. So be careful of that. And when I say provide feedback, I'm not just talking about to your team members, I'm talking about yourself too. We talked a little bit about managing yourself. So provide feedback to yourself. Be self-critical. As I mentioned earlier, don't lie awake at night criticizing yourself, thinking everything that you could have done better throughout the day. But make a mental note of it. Recognize things that you could have done better. Note it down mentally and make a resolution to yourself that next time I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z instead of A, B, and C. Because next time is something that I still have control over. Last time is something that I don't have any control over. So I can't dwell over it. I keep coming back to this point because it's so important, is we really need to focus on what's in our sphere of control and really practice this concept of acceptance, if you will, of things that are outside our control. You save yourself time, you save yourself stress, and you will not get gray hair as quickly. You won't go bald as quickly, like me, who has spent way too much time stressing about stuff that I shouldn't be stressing about. So to sum it up here, we have some homework for you. Here's what we would like to see you guys do with the information presented in this 2-part webinar. If you haven't watched part 1, please go check it out. It's available on YouTube. It's available on NIMSY's Facebook page. It's available at www.nimsy.com. You can watch it in its entirety. Check it out. Share it, like and share, subscribe, all that stuff. But coming out of this webinar is the same thing we wanted to do with the first webinar. Continue the conversation. If you think this was useful, or you think this could be useful to somebody that you know or work with or who reports to you, continue the conversation. Talk to folks about this. Figure out, what could we be doing better as a team? What can I be doing better as a project manager? So don't stop here. It doesn't mean that everything presented in these webinar series is going to be relevant to everybody. If you can find 1 or 2 things from part 1 or part 2 or both, maybe found one thing from both parts that really works for you or that spoke to you, then I consider this a success. I consider it a successful webinar. If you found nothing, then I apologize. We will refund 100% of your money. Don't worry about it. But you don't need to take all of the advice in here. Figure out what works for you. Focus on that. If you think something that could be helpful for your team, roll it out. These webinars, they're available on YouTube. Share it with folks. You can use it as training. If you have questions, you contact us. I'll put our emails down in the description for the links, and reach out to us anytime. Carolyn or myself, we'd both be very happy to hear from you. But if you're going to roll this out, or if you're going to take action, here's what I ask of you. I have a favor to ask. Don't get distracted, because the number one reason I see initiatives fail in larger companies is because it gets rolled out, people get excited, they say, wow, a bunch of really great ideas in here, and then they get busy, or the client sends a big handoff, and everybody kind of forgets about it. So if you really want to make progress on this, and I'm saying this because it's the only way, is you can't get distracted. You got to keep focused. Put it on your calendar now. Put in a 30-day checkup, a 60-day checkup, a 90-day checkup with your team, with yourself, just to sit down and take inventory of how am I doing? All of the stuff that we talked about, all of the stuff that we learned in this webinar, how am I doing with that? Am I making progress? Have I defined my 5-year goals? Have I identified my strengths and weaknesses? have I taken steps to build a culture of trust on my team? Ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself the same questions in 30 days, in 60 days, in 90 days. So put it on your calendars now. Follow up. You won't be sorry. And with that, I would like to invite for questions, but at the same time, I want to be very respectful of everybody's time. So what I'm going to ask folks to do is leave your questions in the comments, whether you're logging in Facebook and YouTube. If email's really your thing, then go ahead and send us an email. I'll make sure those are in the descriptions. And with that, I want to say thank you very much. Carolyn, did you have any closing remarks to bring us home?
Just wanted to say thank you to Nimsy and Tucker again. It's really been a pleasure. And thank you everyone for your time. I hope you found the webinar useful and practical.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you to everybody that joined today. With that, we're signing off, and we wish you a very wonderful day.